just published a collection of his works. Ha! Plays for the ladies at court to perform for each other. He just sent it to me for my birthday. But I die leaving nothing to mark my passing. Well, I hope these get better with age. My tincture, my medicine. Don't think it does any good. I'm still dying. For 30 years I've been dying. Ay me. The complete works of Ben Jonson. I wanted to do that. I wanted to take up all my plays and put them into one big book. But it's hard to find all the playbooks. Ben always wins at these things. Where it is. Damn it! Damn, where? My old friend Hamlet. I want to have this for the big book. If a man doesn't build a monument to himself before he dies, his memory won't live past the tolling of the church bells. God is surely a Puritan. Heaven has stolen my ability to write. Scrivener's palsy, 4 years now. Writer's cramp, and my brain can no longer think its thoughts. Pox has rotted it beyond repair. When a man receives his death sentence at age 24, it changes everything his life might have been. So this must my monument be. Will Shakespeare, actor and poet. I contracted my death from loving a lady. Love's dearest spite, loathsome canker lives in sweetest bud. Yes, I know who gave it to me, and no, I'm not going to tell you. I was a boy, newly arrived in London, with every intention on remaining faithful to my wife, who refused to move with me to London. And no, I'm not going to tell. I had a job as an apprentice actor and playmaker waiting for me in London when I arrived. But this grand rondure was not enough for me, not for my ambition, not Will Shakespeare. I wanted to write epic poetry, not just adapt stories to the stage for theatrical amusement. So I sought out another patron, besides my theatrical patron, a noble patron for my real writing. Now, a distant relation, my mother's third cousin, by marriage, had attained an earldom under Henry VIII. God help us, how does this nation survive? The Earls of Southampton, they took the name Rosalie. Roses were the symbol of the town of Southampton, but they spelled it with a W. Rosalie. Rosalie. They made that up themselves. Everybody's a poet these days. So, with a letter of introduction from my mother tight in my fist, I approached their stately home with no idea what lay ahead. Now, I knew the Rosaleys were Catholics. We Catholics always help each other out. We have our own taverns, our own schools, and secret sacraments. Now, it was death to be a Catholic under Elizabeth, her royal nibs, the Queen Paranoical. The widow Countess Southampton, Lady Mary Rosalie, was one such secret Catholic. She was the granddaughter of Viscount Montague and the mother of young Henry, the Earl, who was 16 and away at school when I arrived that summer's day. Henry Earl Rosalie, H-E-W. Hugh, a man of many hues. Oh, Henry. Henry. Ben Jonson just published a collection of his works. Have I said that already? I wanted to do that, take all my books, all my plays, and put them into one big book. The complete works. May I live so long. Today's my birthday. April 23rd, year of our Lord, 1616. I'm 52 years old. I must get changed. They're having a party for me downstairs tonight. So, I stood before Lady Mary Rosalie. Another queen, God rest her, considered herself a poet. God help us, the queen poetical. And Lady Mary wanted a poet in her patronage for her son, like all the great lords. Now, Henry was only 16 at the time. Thank God he had Lady Mary for a mother. I arrived at their sprawling home, one of their sprawling homes. They were rich beyond their own knowledge. I knocked on the door. I had the letter from my mother in my hand, and I was received by Lady Mary in a blue and gold brocade gown. My eyes rioted in my skull. Now, she was 13 years older than I, but remains the most beautiful woman I've ever seen to this day. Not just because of her wealth and show. She was beautiful. She received me, asked me about myself. With my heart in my throat, I answered, "I'm a poet, Mum." She laughed. I think she laughed at my accent. She shone her magnificent eyes on me, and she said, "Really? And just what kind of things do you write about?" "Any and all things under the story form of heaven, good my lady." Now, mute would have been a better choice than dumb. My stomach joined my heart in my throat. Hard to talk like that. Well, she asked me to write her something poetical, something, sonnet. We were in the garden. "Sweet William," she said. She was standing next to the Sweet William. Oh, she was clever. "If it is true that you could write about anything, could you write about a beautiful day such as this?" I'll never forget it. She was standing next to the Sweet William. She brushed her hand over the blossom and smelled the tips of her fingers. She left me alone in the garden with ink and paper. "Write about the day? What is a midsummer's day compared to her? She fills my senses, my mind, my world. What is a summer's day compared to that?" "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate." That's not really comparing, is it? It's contrasting. To compare would be to say how she was like to the summer's day. Well, she didn't notice, or if she did, she didn't say anything. She was the soul of elegance. A sonnet. Do you know what a sonnet is? It is a short poem. A sonnet, you see, is 14 lines of 10 syllables each, a brief. Only enough room for one idea to be expressed and turned over once or twice. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate." Thank you. Oh, please, please. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Yes. When I was a boy, I had a teacher who used to tell me, "Will, poetry is how we ennoble our language. At what point does language become art? Language," he said, "as all things, becomes art when we place it within a structure. Verse poetry is how we make our language art." Here's to you, Master Jenkins. Without you, I'm still a merchant. Shakespeare and Son. Glovers. Lady Mary loved the little sonnet. She took me in her patronage and asked me to live in the big house. I nearly fainted. "The privilege of the poet laureate of the Earl of Southampton," she said. They lived in a converted monastery in Southampton, and they had an Italianate villa in the country with an Italian art museum and a library of things Italian. I spent a lot of time there. Her family, the Montagues, traveled extensively in Italy. Well, I was happy, working at the Burbage Theatre and writing poetry for a goddess at night. The Burbage boys. Two brothers, an actor and a businessman. They were the sons of the founder of the first theatre in London. Now, their theatre was called The Theatre. What need had it for a name? It was the only one. I love the old building. We finally had to tear it down and move it across the river and rebuild it there. We called it the Globe. From gloves to globes. My life was changing one letter at a time. Gloves. My father made gloves, and he wanted me to do that too. He was a good man, and a rascal, and a scoundrel. He was the head of a secret Catholic organization in Warwickshire, and the local magistrate there. So I was in and out of court at his side more often than I care to remember, on both sides of the dock. Yeah. When I first arrived, we were acting at the old theatre. One time, during a production of Richard III, a fine London lady sent a note backstage to Dick Burbage, who was on stage when the note arrived. It said, "Come meet me after," and gave her address and so forth. Well, I left the theatre quickly before he had a chance to change out of his play clothes, and I went to her house. Well, she was happy to receive the author of the play, and was intent on entertaining me to her fullest capacity, when a servant arrived and said that Master Burbage had arrived at the door. Well, I wrote off a quick note and I sent it down with the butler. The note said, "William the Conqueror comes before Richard III." It's a true story. Dick never did forgive me that. Dick Burbage will be here tonight. He's coming for my birthday. A compound of mercury. The cure is worse than the disease. Like the love that started it all in the first place. Ah, life. The more I wrote to Lady Mary, the more Lady Mary approved. To see her smile, I would write sonnets without end. My first behest from her was to write sonnets to Henry in her name, as if she had written them. Henry. He's a pretty one. All the women love Henry. Takes after his mother. One of the Queen's most powerful lords, Cecil Burleigh, he was a Catholic hater and persecutor. He wanted to tear down all the Catholic strongholds wherever he could find them. But one day he says to Lady Mary that he wants Henry to marry his granddaughter Elizabeth. She's a good girl. I always liked Elizabeth. Not much to look at, but of quick mind and pure heart. Well, Mary knew that Elizabeth wasn't to Henry's taste, but she also knew of Burleigh's power. So if Henry refused the marriage, then Burleigh could take harsh measures against the estate. So my first job was to write sonnets to Henry from Mary, encouraging him to marry Elizabeth. Now, these sonnets were like little letters. She would fold them up into little cards and sign her name at the bottom. I think I might still have some here. Oh, here's one. For shame deny that thou bearest love to any, who for thyself art so unprovident. Grant if thou wilt, thou art beloved of many, but that thou none lovest is most evident. Pretty bad, I know, but I was young and just getting started. For you are so possessed with murderous hate that against thyself thou stickest not to conspire, seeking that beauteous roof to ruinate, which to repair should be thy chief desire. Her chief concern was for the house of Rosalie. Make you another self for love of me, that beauty still may live in thine or thee. Now she did not want the house of Rosalie to fall, nor gain the anger of old man my Lord Burleigh. Well, the time soon came for Henry to come home and meet his new poet. Henry had more possessions than he knew. To him, I was just one more. He was a wastrel then, and remains a wastrel to this time. If he was here, I would tell him so. This is what one would expect him to be, raised the way he was. No responsibility, no want unmet. And to make it all the worse, he is gloriously beautiful. But Henry did not want to marry Burleigh's granddaughter, although she was a fine young lady, a finer person perhaps than himself. So, when Henry finally refused the match, then Burleigh fined the family £5,000, a staggering sum. And with no lord to help manage things for her and her son, it would be hard for Mary to recover. Well, I didn't see much of Henry at first, but I kept the poetry flowing, dedicating it all to him. And if my theatrical duties took up too much of my time, I would hear from Henry, demanding more poetry for the consumption of him and his friends. Oh, Henry. He lived to impress his friends. And his cousin, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, another fool, another victim of the Queen's headsman. Henry and Essex are both condemned to die by the Queen, and I along with them very nearly. Well, I found that if I took stories and adapted them into poetical playbooks for the theatre, I could make some extra money. So I put a lot of my time into this, perhaps a bit too much. I've been trying to collect all the plays together for the works book, but I don't have too many of the playbooks from those days. The players were always losing theirs, and there was never enough to go around. Actors are not the most responsible lot. We used to have to put fines into their contracts. Like this. If an actor was late for a rehearsal, he was fined 12 pence. If he missed the whole thing, 10 pence more. If on a performance day he's not ready to perform at 3 o'clock, he pays 15 pence. And if he shows up drunk, he pays 50 pence. If he misses a performance, he pays £1 sterling. And if he wears any of the costumes out of the theatre, he is fined £40. These are the kind of people that had the playbooks. No wonder they're all lost. Well, life was going well for me. I had living quarters and a small stipend from Southampton. I had a few chinks for acting at the theatre and a bit more for adapting stories into plays for them. Lady Mary was the biggest admirer of my poetry. It had an intoxicating effect on her. I would write, and she would react towards me in ways I never dreamed possible. I was so young and foolish. I had no idea what the point and power of poetry was really all about. Gentlemen, take heed. Women love poetry. Oh, and if you don't have time to write any poetry of your own, feel free to use mine, but only in the pursuit of fair pursuits. Life was indeed grand. In '91, we found out that the Queen was going to come visit us in Southampton. She would put forth a pilgrimage that would visit all the houses of nobility in England. She would visit the Montagues up north and proceed directly to our house, Lady Mary's and mine. Now, this house had a theatre built into the upstairs. Oh, and I had a battle on my hands in '91 too. My plays were beginning to gain attention, and so was I. So, the grand pissing conduits of London decided it was time to attack and pillage me. Look what one fellow wrote about me in '91. Well, I put those pamphlets, and there they are. This was circulated by one Master Nash, called Snaggletooth and Master Bombastical. Nor had my prose any skill to sit tabling 5 years together, nothing but to be and to he on a paper drum. Now, to be was referring to my first Hamlet, and to he was referring to my sonnets for Henry. Some will take in their freight of feathers and bear their sails as proudly as if they were blasted with bull beef. Feathers! I write the stuff of feathers. Now, Master Nash, in his delusion, wanted to replace me as Henry's poet. He began writing directly to Henry. He told Henry that he was omitted from the catalogue of great English heroes, and that Nash, with full sail, would remedy that. That Henry even entertained this is what hurt. I wanted him to dismiss this rag out of hand. But Henry's heel was set to praise. You would expect nothing more from my Lord Vanity. Now, Master Nash's most notable poetical work was one we all called The Dildo. It was about a woman who solved the problem of her incapable lover. This was the sort of man whose attention Henry entertained. Well, I felt sided rather than to argue with this vulgarian. Now, Lord Spencer, a very wise man indeed, he understood. He circulated this shortly after the Nash pamphlet. Our pleasant Willie is dead of late, with whom all joy and jolly merriment is also dead. Lord Spencer loved the comedies. Scorning the boldness of such base-born men, which dare their follies forth so rashly throw, doth rather choose to sit in idle cell, than so himself to mockery to sell. Lord Spencer understood, but Henry did not. Henry wanted this to continue. And then this appears in print, addressed to the poets of London. Beware, gentlemen, for there is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, and is in his own conceit the only shake scene in a country. Let that ape imitate your past excellence, and never more acquaint him with your admired inventions. Feathers again! And Ben Jonson still calls me ape. Well, they were bent my deeds to draw, it seems. Who knows why people will oppose a man for simply doing anything? But I needed Henry to carry me through this disgrace. If he stood by me, then the detractors, Chettle, Nash, and the rest, would have to hide their faces. If they were trying to drive a wedge between us. People like to do that kind of thing, you know. Well, I finally spoke to Lady Mary about it. She would not intercede publicly on my behalf, of course, but perhaps she would talk with Henry. Well, Lady Mary, she told me, she said, "My darling Will, Henry is a willful child. He wants to be the center of attention. Treat him like that, and he will soon understand his role." So, I wrote to Henry. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Yet in these things, myself almost despising, happily I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at the break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. And thy love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Henry stood by me, forced a retraction of the Shakespeare pamphlet, and refused Nash's overtures, saved my career from certain ruin. Oh, Lady Mary, she knew. Where was I? Oh yes, Queen 91. Well, Lady Mary asked me to write something special for the Queen. Her cousin, Montague, was going to be coming down here with the Queen. Now, I remember these stories I read about this family, Capulet in Italy, and the stories of the Italian Montagues. Well, Lady Mary's Montagues were no relation to the Italian Montagues, but I decided to render the Capulet Montague story poetic for the occasion. The Queen's entourage finally arrived, and I had never seen anything like it. And the curtsies and the retainers and the carpet knights, there was no end to it. And Lady Mary's grandfather, Viscount Montague, arrived with the Queen. Now, we presented the play, we lit the stage with candles and presented the play at night. It was very dramatic. And Henry, Earl Rosalie himself, played Romeo. I wrote it for him to do so. So, when Juliet says, "What is a Montague? A rose by any other name would smell sweet." Since Henry's last name was Montague Rosalie, the Queen and court burst into laughter. 10 years later, when Henry, Essex, and the rest of the fools stood in the dock convicted of treason, the Queen executed them all. except Henry and me. Henry. A man can inherit power and wealth and beauty, but honor and decency not. Well, after Romeo and Juliet, life was pure joy. Until 2 years later, Lady Mary called for me. Will, she said, she was almost crying, I have something I need to tell you. Lady Mary would wed. No, Lady Mary, God, no, you do not love him! She gritted her teeth. She could be tough when she had to be tough. Do not presume to tell me whom I do and do not love. But Mary, you may be only a poet, Will, but you're still my poet. So, Lady Mary wedded Lord Heminge. He was 18 years her senior. Oh, I knew she had to. Her fortune was being washed away and he could help manage things for her. He was a very powerful lord, the treasurer of the chamber. My life was never the same after that. My world shattered. She would move out of our house and live with him. My heart broke. I wrote her a play for her wedding day. It was called Midsummer Night's Dream. My summer's day in her had become a summer's night. Shall I compare thee to a summer's night? It was not an adaptation, it was a play of my own creation, my first. Lady Mary gave me a gift also. Money. Money! £1,000 to ransom her guilt, to mend my tattered heart. She gave it in the name of Henry, of course. Everything in her life was that. So Lady Mary moved away. That was done. She was gone. Henry and I inherited each other. Oh, Henry had no idea what was going on. Narcissus himself never knew such conviction. But as long as I kept flattering his vanity, I was kept on the patronage roll. Henry, he didn't understand the poetry. Didn't even read it. And I started spending less time at the house and more time at the theater. It was there I met Lucy Morgan, the Blackamoor girl. Black of skin, blacker of deed, and blackest of heart. And will I swear that beauty herself was black, and all those foul that thy complexion lack. I plied her with sonnets. It worked. Gentlemen, take this to your trust. Women love poetry. Oh, come on, ladies, you know it's true. Oh, she took me to her bed, and it was glorious. The black satin of night took form in her and enclosed me in its folds. She turned me away again as quickly. First I thought it was a conscience. She was still married at the time. But I found out straight away And when one such as he woos, what woman can say nay? And Lucy never said any nay. And when once mistress to an earl, what need had she for a poet? But Henry, the divine fool of our divine age, did not know her secret or mine. Lucy had the pox, syphilis, and she wasn't about to mention it to him. So, I have a conundrum. Should I tell him? Should I have told him the shit? Well, I did. Not! Ah. Oh, look, you not at me that way. I was his poet, not his keeper, not his doctor, not his condom salesman. I was his poet. I wrote him poetry. I tried to warn him in a sonnet, but of course he did not read it. I wrote it about him and Lucy. This one first. Two loves I have of comfort and despair, which like two spirits do suggest me still. The better angel is a man right fair, the worse spirit a woman coloured ill. To win me soon to hell, my female evil tempteth my better angel from my side, and would corrupt my saint to be a devil, wooing his purity with her foul pride. And whether that my angel be turned fiend, suspect I may, yet not directly tell. But being both from me, both to each friend, I guess one angel in another's hell. Yet this shall I ne'er know, but live in doubt, until my bad angel fire my good one out. Fire out is what we used to say about giving someone the pox. Syphilis? Well, I would not know about Henry and Lucy until I saw the pox on Henry. Oh, but it arrived. Dark brown spots appeared on his soft, beautiful skin. The shit. Both of them shits! I was so angry that I violated the sonnet form for the first time in my life. I was so angry and writing so angrily that I wanted to kill them both. I wrote like a simpleton as I was writing to a simpleton. The forward violet thus did I chide, sweet thief, whence didst thou steal that sweet that smells, if not from my love's breath? This is all the posy you deserve, my dear Henry, my traitor. I'll write this on a level even you can understand. The violet. The purple pride which on thy soft cheek for complexion dwells, in my love's vein thou hast too grossly dyed. The lily I condemned for thy hand, and buds of marjoram for thy hair. The roses, now when we come to roses, we come to Henry. The roses fearfully on thorns did stand, one blushing shame, another white despair, Lucy and me. A third, Henry, not red nor white, had stolen them both, and to his robbery had annexed thy breath. But for his theft in pride for all his growth, vengeful canker, eat him up to death! Oh, Henry, Christ, Henry. More flowers I noted, yet I none could see, what sweet or colour it had stolen from thee. Blah blah, blah blah, blah blah, blah blah, blah blah. Idiot. 5 years later, as Henry stood in the dark, convicted of treason, he began to cant like a cuckoo. He nearly got me killed. Him and his cousin, his noble Nibs, Earl of Essex, a greater pissing conduit in London. And as I stood in the back of the court to hear the sentences, Essex started quoting from Falstaff. "I owe my country a life," he started. Well, I wanted to start out the back door of the courtroom. all eyes turned to me. The next day they came for me, calling for questioning, a conspiracy to treason. 2 years earlier, the Queen and Essex had an argument. She banished him her presence permanently. Now, he languished there for a while until he decided he'd had enough. And then he decided he would force his way into the court. And with enough men and popular support, he would restrain the Queen's guard and depose her forthright and place the crown upon his own head. At least that's what I think he had in mind. And that's when he called for me, of all things. I had no idea what the fool was up to. None of us fancied the Queen, but none of us were fool enough to raise arms against her. Well, Henry and Essex requested a production of Richard II the day before the attack was to take place, and paid us an extra 20 shillings to do it. Now, have you ever seen Richard II? A banished earl forces his way into the royal person, makes demands, steals the crown. Well, that day, Essex ordered all of his men to the Globe, hundreds of them, and we performed Richard II. A very good performance of it. The next day, Henry, Essex, and the rest of the fools made their way from his manor at the Strand, through London, towards Whitehall, where the Queen slumbered. It was a cold, freezing morning, February. What unmade fools. In a heartbeat, the Queen's guard were upon them. They didn't even make it to Whitehall. 3 whacks of the executioner's axe it took to send Essex to his reward. Now, the irony of it all is he could have taken his eulogy from that same play, Richard II, which he was going to use against the Queen. At the end, Richard says, "Sometimes am I king, then treasons make me wish myself a beggar. And so I am. Then crushing penury persuades me I was better when a king, then am I king again. But whate'er I be, nor I, nor any man that but man is with nothing, shall be pleased till he be eased with be nothing." 3 whacks of the axe it took across his bone body. The first struck him in the back, the second the back of the head, the third found his neck, and his head rolled to the ground and stopped, face up, eyes open, weeping. I couldn't bear to watch. Some say the 3 whacks were the Queen's orders. Some say that Essex failed to pay the headsman. Who knows? Now mark you, 2 years later, when all was done, it came out that Essex had sent a ring to the Queen to beg forgiveness. Now this was the same ring she had given him years earlier as a token of her love. It can come out now that the person who was entrusted with the ring never gave it to the Queen. When Elizabeth found out about this, she was devastated. She died 2 weeks after hearing the news. I couldn't write a story like that. So, I'm called in for questioning for my part in the production of the play, which some say incited the events. The Puritans saw it as a chance to be rid of us once and for all. I thought that day in 1601 would be my last free breath. Well, Lady Mary found out about this, of course, and she came to see the Queen. Her son had been convicted of treason and sentenced to death. I wonder, would she have come if it were only me? I kept writing sonnets to Lady Mary and sending them to her even after she left. She wrote me and told me she had all the sonnets I ever wrote to her. She kept them close. Here's one of them. If the dull substance of my flesh were thought, injurious distance should not stop my way. For then, despite of space, I would be brought from limits far remote to where thou dost stay. No matter then, although my foot did stand upon the farthest earth removed from thee, for nimble thought can jump both sea and man as soon as think the place where he would be. But thought kills me that I am not thought, to leap large lengths of miles when thou art gone. With that so much of earth and water rots, I must attend time's leisure with my moan. Receiving not by elements so slow, but heavy tears, badges of either's woe. Lady Mary's coach arrived at Whitehall, and the court was stirring with excitement. She'd been away all these years, but her deeds and her reputation remained. I saw her alight as she swept into the great hall. My heart was in my throat again. God, she was still beautiful, and I was still the little country boy outside her door. I caught a fleeting glimpse of her, and she saw me. I could tell by her eyes that she still loved me. Or maybe it was just the light. She had a long, private conversation with the Queen, reminded her of all the good times in Southampton, and of Henry's Romeo, and the hours of entertainment we'd provided for her. She told the Queen, she said, "Your Highness, these boys want only to gain your attention. They long to look upon you as I do. It's been too many years." The Queen smiled. "Aye, Lady Mary. Essex is the trouble, not these sweet ones." And with that, the Queen wept, and Lady Mary comforted her. She took her in her arms. Elizabeth released all of her anger and wounded pride into Mary's arms. No one ever held the Queen! But Lady Mary, she knew what Elizabeth needed. And, thanks to Lady Mary, Henry's sentence was commuted to life in the Tower, and I was released without charges. Essex would have to face the headsman without us. Seems no one, not even a queen, can refuse Lady Mary, Montague, Brown, Rosalie, Heneage, Harvey, anything she asks for. But Henry's conviction cost the family their title and their holdings. Mary's direst nightmare. The heralds visited all of the estates and tore down the Rosalie coats of arms off everything they could find. The family was stripped of their leases, their licenses, their holdings, and I had to move out of the house. I took an apartment on Silver Street above the Frenchies, the Montjoys. Love that name. Christophe and Marie. Hard to find anything decent in London when your income consists of penny stickers and hazelnuts. But the Montjoys filled my head with things France and French from my plays. Especially Marie. She loved the poetry. Women love poetry. And Henry lived in a fine apartment in the Tower for 2 years until the Queen finally, gloriously, blessedly, happily, or unhappily, died. King James of Scotland took the throne. His first act was to release Henry from the Tower. He extolled Henry's bravery in being able to face up to the Queen. Now, the fact that James is as homosexual as Henry is beautiful, I'm sure had nothing to do with it. The second act was to appoint me and my mates, the Royal Theatre Company. We were the king's men. Now, James wanted theatre performed by the lot, and he didn't care that we were Catholics. Did I tell you that Henry won't be here tonight? He hasn't spoken to me since then. Since he got out of the tower, since he found out about what I did. About all's well. I did something terrible. I was disloyal. I betrayed him. It was all meant as a joke, but at Henry's expense. I was angry with him. He'd got me kicked out of my quarters in his house. He lost his power, his money, his title. But the shit, the fucker, he stole my mistress. He got me arrested. He treated me like dirt. He got himself convicted of treason. The shit, he ruined our lives. He ruined Mary's life. When Henry was in the Tower and the Queen was at Richmond, I wrote a play, and a character in it I based on him. It was a foolish popinjay. I never meant Henry to see it. It was my own foolishness, my own stupidity. Everyone wanted to make Henry the butt. I just joined in, that's all. He hasn't spoken to me since then. 10, 11 years. This can't get out of me! How, like my warring state, my poor soul, center of my sinful earth. Are you and your body enemies? Are you at war with time? Never any peace? Not a day in the year, not a moment in the day. When Henry got out of the tower, he eventually found out, and he raged at me for being a traitor to him. To our friendship, to his mother. If he'd had his power and his money, he would have destroyed me. But he was angry, hurt, humiliated. But he had nothing but an empty title. Some of his property back he couldn't afford to manage, and his disgrace. He will probably die penniless. He will surely never speak to me again. Henry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you shit, I'm sorry! There's something wrong with me. Something besides this disease which consumes me. Blasted writer's crap. My father told me, from the moment I left Stratford, he hated me. I'm sorry, Father! You died without putting things right with me. You died telling me there was something terribly wrong with me. Oh, what is wrong with me? I wanted to grow up and write great epics like Homer and Ovid. The world is different now. There can be no more Ovids. When I was a boy, I got a job up north as a tutor. My 16th and 17th years. Of course, we performed plays. My father sent me there to avoid my going to a Protestant college. It was there I met Lord Derby and Burbage and the rest of the lads. Now, my job ended, but they had gone off to fight a war in the Netherlands, and I was too late to join them. So masterless, I went back to Stratford. My father was happy to have me back, but all I wanted was the theatre company to come back and reform and take me with them. And they wanted me too. I started spending time with Anne Hathaway. Her father had just passed away, and she was very sad. And she loved my poetry. The women, well, you know. 2 months after her father died, a month after I arrived, Anne presents herself to my household and announces to my father that she is pregnant with my child. I see now that I was a naive young boy. Well, my father and her father have been great friends, so my father demanded an immediate wedding. You will wed this girl! But father, I want to go to London. You will do as I say! He raged at me. My father raged at me. I wept. Nothing mattered to him but this, and I wanted nothing more than to join the Lord Derby's men. But he insisted. You will do this. You will stay in Stratford. You will marry Anne. You will raise a family! He was right, of course. I agreed, and I gave in. This is the sonnet I wrote for Anne at the time. Those lips that love's own hand did make breathed forth the sound that said, I hate. To me that languished for her sake, but when she saw my woeful state, straight in her heart did mercy come, and chided that tongue that ever sweet was used in giving gentle doom, and taught it thus anew to greet. I hate, she altered with an end that followed it, as gentle day doth follow night, who like a fiend from heaven to hell is flown away. I hate, from hate away she threw, and saved my life, saying, not you. Hate away she threw, you get it? And hate away. It was my own wishful thinking that perhaps she would somehow love me. I, who languished in Stratford for her sake, while my dear friends were back from the wars and performing theatricals all over England, and anxious for me to join them. Did I tell you that my darling daughter, Suzanne, is having a party for me downstairs tonight? All the lads from London will be there. Burbage, Conville, Hemmings, all coming here to celebrate. Henry won't be here though. Henry, I don't know who was the biggest fool. The foolish young boy or the foolish old man? The foolish young boy who's defeated by the very life he was born to own. The foolish old man whose whose foolishness bars him from living the very life he created for himself. Oh, Henry, like my friend the kingly, I got old before I got wise. Father, my way from Stratford to London went through my father. It wasn't fair. He made me choose. I wasn't going to give up on my family, though I had every reason to. I was going to remain their father, if not the husband. My father, he never forgave me. My father gave this to me. Sir! A word with you. Yes. Art thou not a calf, and therefore veal? Aye, no, sir. Nothing quite so vile. Why, I know thou art. Or, then was foolishness to ask the question. This veal is a villain. I shall put him to the test. Sir! How much ribbon can 3 pence buy? Why, 3 pence worth. I gave this to my son. How he loved it. He loved it. He was only 11 when he died. Old enough to know what was happening to him, but too young to understand. Grief fills up the room of my absent child. Lies in his bed, walks up and down with me, puts on his pretty looks, repeats his words, remembers me all his precious parts, stuffs out his vacant garments with his form. Then will I have reason to be fond of grief. My son, my child, my life, my breath, my food, my all the world. His twin sister, Judith, she just married Quine's boy. Now, Quine was a piece of work. His son is even worse. He got Judith pregnant, or he got another girl in the village pregnant. But he has chosen to marry Judith. What are you doing? She knows what she's doing. She's doing it just to spite me. I altered my will a month ago. I left the bulk and best of my estate to my daughter Suzanne, the second best to my wife Anne. Now I withheld Judith's portion of the estate for 5 years, so that fortune seeker that married her might get bored and leave. Suzanne was pregnant at the time of her marriage also. The curse of Stratford follows me through time. Hamlet, I feel I need to tell you this. I wrote a play called Hamlet. Now, when I was a boy, everything was illegal. If you wanted to be a borrower, a lender, illegal. If you wanted to trade goods without official permission, illegal. If you wanted to be Catholic, illegal. Now, my father, rest his soul, was all these. Dad, I miss you more than even I, with all my words, could say. And how my father used to love the plays. He and some of his friends from the village would get together and perform small performances. All the tradesmen working together. It was very funny. And the touring productions, whenever they came through, they would have to put on private productions for the aldermen. Oh, my father loved this. And it was a big impression on me, sitting on his lap, watching the plays, watching him, watching them, along with my mother. Mother, how I love thee. The shadow of your slightest breath can tend my world. I miss your love around me. She was my ground, my soul. She is in everything I ever wrote. She died here in Stratford 8 years ago. The same year Lady Mary died. I miss you, Mum. When, to the sessions of sweet silent thoughts, I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the loss of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's stainless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances forgone, and heavily from woe to woe tell all the sad account of fore bemoaning moan, which I knew pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friends, all losses are restored, and sorrows end. I stayed with Anne for 3 years. We bore twins in that time, a daughter and a son. But I was withering away. I finally decided that I would move to London. But my way to London went through my father. I would have to confront him and get his acceptance. But I would do this. I had to do this, and I would not be denied. My father said I did not love him. He said, the only way for you to prove your love to me is to stay in Stratford. I could not swear my love for him in any way he could understand. I told him I had to leave. I would leave. And he said, I'm throwing you out. And his son that does not love his father is not worthy of his father's love. He was blind with rage, and I was devastated. I loved him so much, but my mind was set. I would move to London and nor stop loving him, nor mother, nor being Anne's husband, no matter what. So I packed my bags and went to London. Anne didn't seem to mind. She showed no interest in coming with me. Shortly after I arrived in London, 86, I began writing a new play about a father who made demands of his son that his son simply could not do. And I worked on it off and on for 10 years or so. We performed it early, but it wasn't right. Then I got it. My life might have been different. Oh, yeah. Obey your father. Anne Hathaway. That afternoon, Henry. Lady Mary Rosalie. I was her poet. The night came when she took me to her bed and made love to me. Oh. I thought myself never so blessed but to be loved by the most magnificent creature that ever roamed God's earth. All my life to nothing. Lady Mary had the pox, syphilis, the lady's secret. Oh, I would not have guessed that, not of her, not have assumed that of her, but she was a countess for Jesu's sake. But she was a woman who loved her gentleman, perhaps a bit too much. If only she'd told me. By the time I found out it was too late, I was changing in the theatre for a play, and my mates saw the dark brown cankers on my skin, the dark clouds rising at me. It was they who first told me what it was. They tried to comfort me. They told me that not everybody dies from it, but sometimes it never gets past the dark spots. Sometimes it takes 40 years to kill you. Well, I went to Lady Mary. I showed her the dark clouds in me. She said it was true. I wept. She wept. I don't know which of us was the biggest fool. Why did you promise me such a beautiful day and bid me travel forth without my cloak, and let base clouds o'ertake me in my way, hiding thy beauty in their rotten smoke? It was hard to see how beautiful she was past the base clouds on my skin. It is not enough that through the clouds thou break to dry the rain on my storm-beaten face. I wept. She dried the tears from my face. For no man well of such a salve can speak, that heals the wound and curses not the disgrace. Nor can thy shame give physic to my grief, though thou repent, yet I still have the loss. She was truly sorry, and yet I was dead. The offender's sorrow lends but weak relief to him that bears the strong offence's cross. Oh, how could I stay angry at this most beautiful of God's creatures? It only gave me in love what I would have taken else. No more be grieved at that which thou hast done. Roses have thorns. Her name was still Rosalie at the time. Roses have thorns and silver fountains mud. Clouds and eclipses stain both moon and sun. Yeah, we both had it, not just me. And loathsome canker lives in sweetest bud. And her bud was indeed the sweetest. All men make faults, and even I in this, authorizing thy trespass with compare, myself corrupting, serving thy amiss, excusing thy sins, more than thy sins are. For to thy sensual fault I bring incense. Thy adverse party is thy advocate, and against myself a lawful plea commence. Such civil war is in my love and hate. I swear to God I love her, and yet I would kill her. That I an accessory needs must be to that sweet thief which sourly robs from me. My life. Well, the lads, they knew I'd been infected by somebody, and of course they wanted to know by who. Lady Mary was afraid I would tell the whole of London about her. She looked at me, she said, Will, I interrupted her. No, Lady Mary, no. Not I. Not the ladies in court or the queen shall ever know from either score. Oh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. We must not be seen together, she said. We must not be seen together. Dagger! No, lady, no, we must not be seen together now. Lest my sin be adjudged yours. Let me confess that we two must be twain, although our undivided loves are one. So shall those blots that do with me remain without thy help, by me be borne alone. In our two loves there is but one respect, though in our lives a separable spite, which though it alter not love's sole effect, yet doth it steal sweet hours from love's delight. I may not evermore acknowledge thee, lest my bewailing guilt should do thee shame. Nor thou with public kindness honor me, unless thou take that honor from thy name. But do not so. I love thee in such sort, as thou being mine, is that good report. Left alone to my own lamentations, I poured my meditation into a tiny sonnet. seemed all I was good for. I was not to possess love, only write about it. Poor soul, the centre of my sinful earth, fighting these rebel powers that thee betray. Why dost thou pine and suffer death, painting thy outward wall so costly gay? Why so large cost, having so short a lease, dost thou upon thy fading mansion spend? Shall worms, inheritors of thy excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy body's end? In soul, live thou upon thy servant's loss, and let that pine to aggravate thy store by terms divine in selling hours of dross. Within be fed, without be rinsed no more. So shalt thou feed on death that feeds on men. And death, once dead, there's no more dying then. God. Oh God, Lady Mary, oh God. Rest thy beautiful soul. Lady Mary died 8 years ago. 8 years, 5 months, 19 days ago, my muse died. She was my Rosalind. She was my life and my death. My muse breathes no more. And soon I shall breathe no more. How can my muse one subject to invent? For thou dost breathe that pourest into my verse thine own sweet argument, too excellent for every vulgar poet to rehearse. O give thyself to thanks, if aught in me, worthy perusal, stand against thy sight. For who so dumb that cannot write to thee, when thou thyself dost give invention light? That day in the garden when Lady Mary received me, I loved her instantly. To say I loved her is to violate my life's vocation. I wrote sonnets to her. I wrote plays to her. I summoned heaven and hell on her behalf. She was my Rosaline. She was my Juliet. She was my Titania. She was my disease and its cure together. She was my life and my death. Oh, my death indeed. I shall have deserved my rest. I'm tired of living, tired of seeing, tired with all this. For restful death I cry, and to behold deserve a beggar born, and needless nothing trimmed in jollity, and purest faith unhappily forsworn, and gilded honor wrongfully misplaced, and maiden virtue rudely strumpeted, and right perfection wrongfully disgraced, and art tongue-tied by authority, and folly doctor-like controlling skill, and simple truth is called simplicity. and captive good attending captain ill. Tired with all ease, more ease I would be gone. Save that to die. I leave my thoughts alone. All my loves have left me now. Rest from death seems to have arrived. I leave you this. My works. Or better I should call them my plays. And this one bit of wisdom I have learned in life. Women love poetry.